And the saga continues for Ryan Garcia. Man, this hasn't been the greatest turn of events recently for him. First he goes out there and gets stopped by Tank. Then everybody talks about how he's quitting in the ring, how he didn't really want to be in there. Then we get the reports about how he was already injured and he's got the sparring partner saying things about him. And now all of a sudden we hear that him and Joe Goossen are parting ways after only 3 fights. Now it's not super rare to see a fighter switch trainers, right? There's a whole bunch of fighters who over the course of their professional career have changed trainers once, changed trainers twice. But you always have to wonder a little bit what's going on. You always have to wonder why they're switching. So originally he leaves Eddie Reynoso. By the way, another world-class trainer, but he leaves Eddie Reynoso. And immediately from Eddie Reynoso, we start to hear that Ryan Garcia wasn't dedicated, he wasn't disciplined, he wasn't coming into the gym enough. Then we hear Canelo come out and say, yeah, dude, he needs to start showing up to the gym more. He needs to stay dedicated and he needs to stay disciplined. Ryan Garcia said it was something else, said he wasn't getting enough time from Eddie Reynoso. Said, look, I'm a big name guy. I need a trainer who's going to focus on me. Now, in hindsight, that all starts to make sense. Why is Eddie Reynoso going to focus on a guy who he doesn't feel is disciplined and dedicated? And by the way, he's already got Canelo, who he's focused on. A guy who's not only dedicated and disciplined and done tremendous things in the sport, but is also the cash cow, right? But we hear that, and then all of a sudden he switches and he goes over with Joe Goossen, another world-class trainer. You know, just as a side note, my favorite fight where Joe Goossen was the trainer was the first Corralo-Castillas. Oh, man, if you have not seen that fight, you absolutely must go out there and watch it. It's probably available on YouTube. But what a tremendous fight. And the moment that always sticks in my mind, and this is just a spoiler, but I got to put it out there. But the moment that always sticks in my mind throughout that fight is right at the end, last round, Diego Corrales gets knocked down for, I think it's the second time, spits his mouthpiece out, gets a point deducted. They're going back to the refs, taking him back to the corner to get the mouthpiece washed out. He hands it to Joe Goossen, and Joe looks at him and goes, "You got to knock him out now. You got to knock him out." And then Diego Corrales does exactly that, man. Jumps in there and just closes the show in devastating fashion. What a fight, man. All-time classic. Instant just classic. I can only imagine what it would have been like to be in there, the crowd. Just the energy and the electricity that was just flowing throughout the place. It must have been amazing. Anyways, back to this. So, Joe Goossen, world-class trainer. Ryan Garcia hooks up with him. And we're just hearing obviously nothing but good things during the honeymoon phase. And one of the things that stood out to me, and it especially rings out to this day now that I think about it, is one of the earliest videos that I saw of Joe Goossen working with Ryan Garcia when they were in the gym. It was right after they had hooked up. They didn't have any fights together yet. And Joe Goossen is kind of just, he's totally just hands back. There's a lot of people there, a lot of hands off. So he's talking to the media a lot. He's going from different camera people, mentioning things. And he's just doing nothing but heaping praise on Ryan Garcia. I mean, just out of control. He's like, wow, watch the way he works this bag. Has him on the Cobra bag, and he's like, I didn't even like this bag before. I seen guys work it before. I didn't really think much of it. Kind of thought it was a waste of time. I'd rather him work the double end bag. And then I saw Ryan working, and oh my God, now I can see the tremendous amount of skill that it'll offer a fighter, and what great things that he can do with it, and blah blah. And I remember thinking in my head, like, dude, he's kind of going over the top with how much praise that he's heaping on him. I wonder if he feels like he needs to prove how much he's in Ryan Garcia's corner to Ryan Garcia. I wonder if he feels like the guy, like Ryan Garcia doesn't have enough confidence and he wants to do this as a way to build up his confidence, right? Not an unheard of technique by any stretch of the imagination. But it stood out to me. Not that big of a deal, but whatever. Now all of a sudden we fast forward to this. We see Ryan Garcia go out in this fight. Now look, we saw him go out in this fight with Gervonta Davis, and we saw him do a lot of the same flaws that he's done before. We saw him go out there and get too aggressive. We saw him not work behind the jab. We saw him become overcommitted, particularly behind that left hook. We saw him not maintain the proper distance. We saw him, not use footwork that he needed to use. He had his chin too high, blah, 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 whatever. We saw all these things, and none of this was new. We've seen all these flaws before. Okay? You think Joe Goossen saw those flaws? You think for the 3 fights that Joe Goossen's been working with him, the 3 training camps and whatever they've been doing in between, that he was mentioning these things? He was talking about potential ways to fix that? Of course he was. You think all these people are commenting on it, but Joe Goossen, it just slips right under the rug? No, of course he's mentioning these things. But there's another thing that Joe Goossen mentioned. There's another thing, right? In the build-up to this fight, he mentioned, you don't really train Ryan Garcia. Now, I know some guys are going to take that negatively, but you collaborate with Ryan. So Ryan Garcia, also accused of only being in the gym approximately 3 days a week in the build-up to this fight with Joe Goossen. He was doing other stuff, training other ways. So I'm not saying that he wasn't in shape or that he wasn't preparing or that he wasn't dedicated, but he was only showing up with Joe Goossen approximately 3 days a week, right? That's what we heard. We hear Joe talking about you don't really train him, you collaborate with him. Covers it up a little bit and says, Ryan Garcia's a great mind, high ring IQ. He's right 99% of the time. That's not really what he was trying to say. What he was really trying to say is, this guy's not coachable. Ryan Garcia doesn't want to learn what you have to say. He wants to tell you what he thinks is going to work, and then he wants you to pick a game plan to make that work. But that ain't the way it works. That ain't the way it goes. Look, when you're dealing with a trainer, one of the things that separates bad trainers from good trainers is whether or not they try to make everybody fit the same mold, or if they can recognize what a fighter's strengths and weaknesses are and develop those. Just think about if you would have taken a fighter like Marcos Maidana, and you'd all of a sudden tried to turn him into a guy who's going to bounce around on the outside and work the jab and be all fleet of foot and box guys to death for 12 rounds. It would have been a disaster, right? Who would do that? If you would have taken Diego Corrales, like I mentioned before, imagine taking Diego Corrales and trying to say, we're going to have you stay behind the jab all night. And then when guys come in, we're going to have you land a hard right hand, clinch, and then back up and start the whole process over like he's Vladimir Klitschko or something. I mean, what a disaster, right? The trainer who was working behind that guy would just drive him right into the ground. That's not what a good trainer does. A good trainer is going to recognize the talents that a man has. He's going to work on those and develop them. He's going to try to hide the deficits, bring up his weaknesses and turn them into non-weaknesses. But you're gonna develop what's there, because not everybody's built the same. Not everybody has the same attributes. Not everybody has the same mindset going in. Some guys want to box from the outside. Some guys just want to put their forehead on their opponent's chest and bang away on the inside all night. And you got to turn both of those men into winners. You have to turn both of those guys into people who succeed at the highest level within their style. That's where the difficulty comes in with the trainer. Reaching somebody, really being able to connect with them and talk to them and bring all of that out. Joe Goossen knows all that. Joe Goossen has proven that he knows all that because he's been successful at the highest level doing all those things in the past. And now he's coming out and saying this about this young guy. That's not a good look, man. It's not a good look. I have to imagine this has become because Ryan Garcia is so insanely successful. You look at after this fight, they're saying supposedly that it was around over 1 million buys, like 1.2 million pay-per-view buys. A lot of that in large part has to be due to Ryan Garcia, because we never saw numbers that through the roof from Tank before. He's a very, very good fighter, but that's not what we're talking about here. He's a better fighter than Ryan Garcia, but that doesn't mean he's more popular than Ryan Garcia. That doesn't mean that when they're sitting there on the pay-per-view that he'll sell more than Ryan Garcia. So my thought is, we see a guy in Ryan Garcia who's young, flashy, incredibly fast hands and physically gifted, explosive, all of these knockouts in the past, and he's generating a lot of money. He's getting all of this praise on things like social media, and there's everything that he can do. So he looks at a guy like Joe Goossen, who now has come out and said that you're basically uncoachable, didn't show up at the post-fight press conference, and maybe, just maybe, he doesn't like the energy that's coming back from him, because Joe's kind of looking at him saying, hey, remember those things that we were talking about in the camp? Those are the things that we're going to need to work on in this next camp, because those are the reasons you got stopped. And maybe Ryan Garcia is looking at it and thinking, I'm the boss here, dude. I hire you just as easily as I can get rid of you and hire somebody else. And if that's the case, if that's exactly what we're seeing here and why they parted ways, I'm just going to jump out right now and say that Ryan Garcia is never going to reach the highest levels. As long as he has an attitude like that, he's never going to reach the highest levels. Dude, he doesn't know more than these guys. If he did, he would have already been there. Now, look, as a trainer, when you see somebody who's a very intelligent fighter, when you see somebody who's accomplished a lot and they're established and they're mature, you're obviously going to work with that person. You're obviously going to say, hey, what do you think about this? Here's how I think you should counter this jab. I think you should stand your ground and use a check left hook. Or I think you should cut it short and then use your own counter jab. Or I think you should get your head off the center line and throw the right hand. Whatever the case may be, you're going to come at this fighter, you're going to talk about it going in. And what if he tells you, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Look, I don't really feel comfortable standing there and shooting that check left hook. I'd much rather handle it this way. I'd much rather, get my head off the center line, take a half step in, get my head off the center line and shoot a right hand to the body. What are you going to tell him? No? Of course not. You're going to work with a guy. You're going to respect the fact that this man is a veteran in the game. He's established. He's mature. He's a professional, somebody who's gone in there and done things. And you're going to to bounce ideas back and forth, and you're going to come up with the best game plan, right? Same thing that we see with, great quarterbacks in the NFL. Offensive coordinators weren't out there dictating to Peyton Manning what he was going to do. They really, truly did collaborate with him. But that's when guys are established. That's when guys are at the top of the game. That's when you have to work with somebody who's a great mind, because you recognize how good both of you are and you talk about things and figure out what's best. That's not what Ryan Garcia is. That's not where he is. And maybe one day he'll be, but it's not today. Joe Goossen is a better boxing mind than Ryan Garcia. So if the case is, as I stated, that he's getting canned for all of those reasons and Ryan Garcia was parting ways with him because of that, it's not a good look. Highly likely that he's going to get somebody else in there who he can kind of dictate things. And you've heard me say it before, it's not good when fighters run their own camps. That's almost a surefire way to have things start to head downhill. So it'll be interesting to see what happens off this one. My guess is that Oscar De La Hoya is going to line up the next fight with somebody that's a guaranteed win, because Ryan Garcia is not going to be able to stand another loss. And not only a guaranteed win, he's going to want somebody that he's going to be able to catch in very impressive fashion with that left hook and take his head off, right? That's how you start to build the buzz and get things back going again, particularly after you see these reports start to come out. They're going to want to squash all those rumors. Whatever trainer's next is going to say nothing but the highest praise. He's going to say, I don't know what happened with any of the last guys. I only know what's going on with me. With me and Ryan right now, and the relationship couldn't be better. Things are great. He's training super hard. He's in here every day. Watch what happens in the next fight. And it's a guy who's just right in front of him with slow feet, getting his head torn off. Wouldn't surprise me at all. But, only time will tell, right? Only time will tell. The guy, Ryan Garcia, is still young. He still has all of the physical attributes and everything that it would take to end up becoming great. But, man, we're seeing these flaws repeat themselves over and over and over again, right? We're seeing him go out there and do those same things. And now we're seeing these things with the trainers. Now it's two trainers. It's not one. Now it's two. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next. What do you guys think of this? Is it not even really that big of a deal? Am I reading into it too much? Or is this a case where there's smoke, there's fire? Let me know what you guys think.